This bank manager thought he was untouchable. He humiliated customers, decided who deserved service and who didn't, and was convinced there would be no consequences. But one ordinary day, he messed with the wrong person. Within minutes, his career was in flames, and within an hour, he became the ultimate example of how fast and ruthless a downfall can be. But let's start from the beginning. Heritage National Bank sat in the heart of Manhattan like a glass and steel monument to capitalism. Inside, the air smelled like expensive cologne, printer ink, and the kind of self-importance that only people in tailored suits could radiate. Customers moved like well-oiled machines, checking their balances, signing off on transactions, and pretending they cared about anything other than their bottom line. Then the doors swung open. Mark Bennett stepped in, 48 years old, tall, and dressed in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than the yearly salary of half the people in this building. He walked with the kind of calm confidence that said, "I belong here." He wasn't rushing, he wasn't flustered. He had come to handle business, his business. Unfortunately, some people had a nasty habit of not seeing what was right in front of them. "Next!" The voice came from Andrew Hunt, the branch manager, a man who looked like he had been assembled from loose turkey skin and bad decisions. 50-something, sagging jowls, and a double chin that wobbled when he talked. The type of guy who took out his personal failures on anyone he considered beneath him. His morning had already been a disaster. His stock investments were in free fall. His wife had called him useless before he even left the house. And the office coffee tasted like someone had brewed it with swamp water. He was not in the mood. Mark approached the counter and placed a leather-bound folder on it. "Good morning. I need to process a large transfer." Hunt barely glanced at him before his lips curled into a smirk. He scanned Mark up and down like he was looking at a car that didn't belong in his driveway. Black, well-dressed, too confident. Probably a scammer. "Oh, and what exactly do you need?" His tone was polite in the same way that a cat toying with a trapped mouse was polite. Mark's face remained neutral. "I need to transfer funds from my account to my business account." Hunt raised an eyebrow and let out a quiet, amused huff. He loved these moments, loved seeing them come in here, acting like they belonged. Are you sure you even have a business account with us?" Mark didn't flinch, but his fingers curled slightly against the folder. "I'm sure." Hunt let the moment stretch, then moved toward his computer at a painfully slow pace. Not to check anything, of course. He just liked making people sweat. "And do you have proper identification? A passport? A state-issued ID?" Mark slid his documents across the counter, but Hunt didn't even glance at them. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and gave a slow shake of his head. "You know, something feels off here. I don't know, you just look suspicious." The murmurs around the bank quieted. A few customers turned their heads. The security guard, a big, bald guy standing near the entrance, shifted his weight slightly forward. Mark tilted his head. "You can't be serious." Hunt grinned. "Oh, I'm absolutely serious. We don't service customers who, let's just say, raise concerns." Mark inhaled slowly, exhaling through his nose. He had seen this before, 1,000 times. The same song and dance, different venue. People like Hunt never said the quiet part out loud. They used words like concerns and security risk, when what they really meant was, "You don't belong here." "Call the branch manager," Mark said, voice cold. Hunt's smirk widened. "Oh? Didn't you figure it out yet? I am the manager. He folded his arms over his chest, leaning forward like he was savoring the moment. He expected Mark to back down, to shuffle away like all the others before him. But Mark didn't. Instead, he smiled. And it was, without a doubt, the most unsettling smile Andrew Hunt had ever seen in his life. The bank lobby had gone completely silent. Conversations had died mid-sentence. Even the usual clacking of keyboard keys and rustling of paperwork had faded. People weren't just watching the scene unfold, they were glued to it. And right in the center of it all stood Andrew Hunt, arms crossed, chest puffed out, looking like he had just won a gold medal in arrogance. To him, this was just another day of putting people in their place. Another instance of a guy walking in, thinking he was important, only to get a harsh reality check from the man in charge, him. So when Mark pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos, Hunt let out a short, amused breath. "Oh, are we taking pictures now?" His smirk deepened as he leaned slightly over the counter. "You think a few photos are going to change something?" Mark barely reacted. Instead, he looked up from his phone and smiled. "Actually, yes." And just like that, the entire game shifted. Because at that exact moment, the bank doors swung open, and in walked two men, not just any men, two executives straight out of the corporate headquarters. Both were white. Both were in sharp, dark suits, and both had the unmistakable aura of people who didn't show up unless something serious was going down. Hunt blinked. This wasn't part of the script. The taller of the two stepped forward, scanning the bank with a no-nonsense kind of gaze before locking eyes on Hunt. "What's going on here?" His voice carried through the room, cutting through the heavy silence like a knife. Hunt, still full of himself, barely bothered to stand up straighter. Instead, he waved a hand toward Mark with bored indifference. "Oh, just some new client who thought he could stroll in here and start making demands." He even chuckled. The second executive, the one with sharper features and an even sharper glare, turned his head slowly toward Mark. And then, in the most calm, terrifyingly professional voice, he said, "Mr. Bennett, is that true?" The air in the room shifted. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was anticipation. The kind where you could feel everyone holding their breath. And Hunt? He froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Because something wasn't right. Mark? Mr. Bennett? Why did that name suddenly feel like a bad omen? Wait. Hunt started. But before he could finish, the first executive turned back to him. And this time his gaze wasn't just sharp, it was lethal. "You do know who this is, don't you?" Hunt felt something cold settle in his stomach. This is Mark Bennett," the second executive interrupted, "president of the company." And just like that, Hunt's entire world collapsed. His knees almost buckled. His throat went completely dry. His brain scrambled to process the information that just shattered his entire reality. President? No, that wasn't possible. He would have known. He should have known. This had to be some kind of joke, some horrible, awful prank that was about to end any second now. But then, the security manager, who had been watching the entire time, stepped forward. "Mr. Bennett, is everything all right?" Hunt's stomach dropped. Again. Because this time, the way security was looking at Mark wasn't with suspicion, it was with respect. And Mark, he still hadn't looked away from Hunt. still standing there, calm, composed, and completely in control. Then, finally, he spoke. Actually, he exhaled slowly. No, no, it is not. And just like that, the whispers started. The murmurs rippled through the lobby, moving like an incoming storm. Customers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Employees began shifting uncomfortably. And the best part? A few people had even pulled out their phones. Because this was a moment worth capturing. Hunt felt every eye in the room turn toward him, watching, waiting, judging, and for the first time in his career, he was afraid. The entire bank was frozen in absolute silence. No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly. Andrew Hunt felt a cold bead of sweat trail down his temple, but he couldn't lift a hand to wipe it away. His limbs refused to cooperate, as if his brain had just hit a full system shutdown. Around him, customers gawked, employees exchanged nervous glances, and a few people, because this was modern America after all, had their phones out, capturing every single second of his downfall. Hunt had spent years building himself up as the top dog of this branch, the guy who made the rules, the one who decided who got service and who didn't. And in less than 5 minutes, all of that power had evaporated into thin air. "Mark, we can discuss this privately," one of the corporate executives stammered, rubbing his temple as if trying to massage away the incoming migraine. His voice had that desperate damage control tone of someone who knew this was about to go very, very public. Mark Bennett smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Oh, we'll discuss it all right, in the conference room." Then he turned, addressing the lobby loud enough for everyone to hear. "But first, I'd like all customers to stay. You'll have a chance to share your experiences with this branch's service." The gasps, the whispering, the sheer panic that flickered across Hunt's face. Oh yeah, his career? It was already a pile of ashes. The private meeting, aka Hunt's funeral service. 10 minutes later, the corporate boardroom had never felt more suffocating. Andrew Hunt sat at the long conference table, shoulders slumped, his face pale as paper. His hands trembled slightly as he wiped at his dry lips, looking like a man begging the universe for a do-over. Across from him sat Mark Bennett, completely relaxed, cool, composed, unreadable, a man who knew he owned the room. The two executives from headquarters weren't much better off than Hunt. One of them, a wiry man with rimless glasses, cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett, I assure you, this is a terrible misunderstanding. I'm sure our branch manager simply misinterpreted the situation." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Misinterpreted?" His voice was too calm. "So when he refused to serve me, was that a misunderstanding?" The executive swallowed. "Well, And when he publicly accused me of fraud, was that also a misunderstanding?" Silence. The other executive, bigger, sweatier, jumped in. "You do understand that if this becomes public, the bank's reputation could suffer immensely." Mark leaned back in his chair, and then he smiled again. "Oh, it's already public." He casually lifted his phone, turned the screen around, and placed it on the table. The video of Hunt's career-ending mistake was playing. It had already racked up 120,000 views in 15 minutes. Hunt let out a small, broken noise, something between a wheeze and a dying breath. "No," he whispered. Mark tilted his head. Oh yes. The execution, not literally, but close enough. 2 minutes later, Hunt was officially fired. 5 minutes later, his access to all banking systems was revoked. 7 minutes later, the security manager himself escorted him out of the building. And outside, the customers were waiting. "Shame," an elderly woman yelled. "People like you used to keep their opinions to themselves," someone else called out. Applause erupted as Hunt, humiliated, ruined, and completely shattered, stepped through the doors for the last time. And the doors slammed shut behind him. But that was just the beginning. A few hours later, his name was all over the news. A day later, his wife filed for divorce. A week later, he applied for a job at another bank. No one would hire him. Why? Because no one wanted to employ a man who had become the face of modern discrimination. Meanwhile, Mark Bennett? He held a meeting with the branch staff and customers, announcing new policies to ensure better service. Real change. And later that night, he opened a very expensive bottle of wine, sat back in his chair, looked at his family, and smiled. Well, at least today was a good day. What would you have done in Mark Bennett's place? Have you or someone you know ever faced a similar situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. If you found this story eye-opening, hit that like button and share it with others. It's time to bring awareness to these issues. This story was created to shine a light on injustice and make the world a better place. Your voice matters. Let's keep the conversation going.